Talks TV. I'm your host, Tony J. And today is the 50th anniversary of hip hop. Now, in this video, um, I was going to do a continuation of my previous video of my 50th favorite um hip hop albums of all time. But I I'm deciding to take a different route with this. And I'll explain why. I don't know if I'm going to leave the video that I currently have up. I may put it on unlisted. Um, but um I may just put it on private. But yeah, that video, I'm gonna go ahead and take that one down. Um when I posted the first video from last week, I got a comment saying that my top 50 sucked. I got a comment from one viewer that said my list was outdated and that the 80s were kind of a dated list. And I wanted to respond to the person that left a comment in my video because, you know, I'm in a group and I'm not going to call that group out by name, but they know who they are. They know who they are. I've been in that group for maybe, say 3 years. Didn't really comment anything until now, but it's one primary reason why I don't like rap fans. And I'm going to explain that before I jump into anything else, before, because this video really was supposed to be about the 50th anniversary and the celebration of hip hop. But I had somebody comment on one of my videos saying that the 80s were outdated and the rhymes were simplistic. And, I get tired of the little bullshit politics that come with the hip hop game. And one of the things that I don't like and I don't respect with certain fans is the fact that they could look at one particular era and say, we don't acknowledge that era, or we don't acknowledge that particular rapper because their rhymes was trash and so on and so forth. And, over the years, I've been in a lot of hip hop fan base groups. I even had one when I was in college. I even had one that I was a part of when I was in college because we shared an affinity. I was a Jay Dilla fan. That other person might have been a 50 Cent fan. And you get these conundrums within hip hop, even today, about, which era was the greatest era. Oh, the 90s was the greatest era. And Biggie and Tupac were the greatest rappers of all time. And then after they died, and the whole genre went to shit after that. But one of the things I really want to emphasize to this particular person that commented on my video is, every era of every decade of hip hop matters. Whether you like it or not, there wouldn't be we wouldn't be where we are if it were not for the rappers in the 70s and the 80s. And I know a lot of people in this group will say, oh, the 80s was trash. It was too simplistic. All the rhymes was dated. That's my grandfather's raps and all this other shit. And this ageism has to stop with the musical genre itself. Every era matters in hip hop. Whether you like it or not, I get sick and tired of one particular faction trying to say that one is worse than the other, and you get into these beefs and these politics about certain rappers. And one of the saddest things about the musical genre itself is how we can say somebody that's 10 years or 20 years hasn't put out an album, or somebody that hasn't put out an album in 3 years is falling off, or there wasn't, they weren't as hot as they thought they were, and all this shit. And the truth be told is, there are some rappers that come into the game, they put one album out, and then they go do something else. There have been many rappers that have done that. Some rappers will do 5 albums and then be done. I mean, the thing about hip hop right now is that what really destroys it is the fans and a lack of appreciation and respect for the previous generations. And I'm starting to notice this as time goes by. There's never this type of reverence or respect for the genre from the younger generation or those in our mid 20s and early 30s. There's no reverence for the previous generations that came before us. Now, I talked about in my previous video, I talked about, some of my favorite rappers from the 80s being Whodini, Run DMC, and Untouchable Force MCs, Full Force. Those are groups that I liked listening to because my father exposed me to those groups when I was younger, when I was a child. That's what made me love hip hop music. And anytime I talk about 80s rappers, you know, I get this look. I get this nasty look from maybe fans who are fans of 90s rap, which is crazy because 90s rap wouldn't be what it is if it weren't for people from the late 80s that were crafting different styles of rhyming. And it's like you have this conflict between the generations. And, it's fun to talk about it, but then it gets to a point where it becomes redundant and disheartening because of the disrespect that comes with that when new generations of rappers come along. Um, I've seen posts. I've seen a post online talking about, Lord Jamar And I know in a group, one of the groups that I'm in, somebody said, oh, Lord Jamal was a trash rapper. And I'm like, who the fuck are you to even say that? Lord Jamal was part of Brand Nubian, and he's contributed more to the culture than anybody that came after him. People don't stay in this field for long. Sometimes, like I said, you may put out one album, then somebody say, well, he's a one-hit wonder or he fell off. But that album, people still listen to that album. Doesn't matter. A hit's a hit, you know. But, you know, a lot of people, and then there's those other factions too, which I'm gonna get into, that I'm getting a little that I'm really getting a little sick and tired of in this group. Everybody putting Biggie and Tupac on this pedestal as if they're like a sacred cow. Like there's that everybody that came before, like acting as if everybody that came before them weren't as good as they were. Only except maybe Biggie only had two albums and one posthumously, and Pac had what, five albums and one posthumously. I mean, it gets to be a tiring argument of who was better. Like 10 years ago, we would be having this discussion about, Biggie and Tupac, who was better. I've had that even in college. Oh, Biggie was better than Tupac. Tupac was way better than Biggie, and da 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 da. And I'm like, you know, it gets to be a redundant argument. Doesn't matter who's better than who. Why can't we just enjoy them as they are? Do we have to place one over the other? Do we have to compare one person to the next, their body of work? Because Big L had the same thing, right? Big L had two albums before he died. But if even I could even make the argument that if he was still around, he probably would have superseded Biggie just like that. It's kind of like putting Michael Jordan up against Len Bias in a sense. They were nice for the time period that they were living in. True. But with rap fans, what I'm getting to is the issue of this whole back and forth that I've noticed about hip hop. We've never seen anything like this in R&B. You don't see anything like this in rock and roll, you know. And in rock, you have people who say, there's nobody saying, well, I think I think Van Halen could beat Kurt Cobain in a guitar contest any day. Da 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 da. You don't hear that in rock and roll. You don't hear that in rock because grunge was its own time period and its time frame, and heavy metal was its own time period. 80s rock and roll was its own time period. You know, classic rock, psychedelic rock was its own time period. You don't have nobody going debating back and forth, but it's always this thing in hip hop where you have people talking about decades of MCs and making light of the contributions of those who came out of the late 70s and early 80s. And we're not just talking just the 80s itself, but we're even talking pre pre-recorded or pre-record. And then also there would be those who were post Sugar Hill Gang or post record. So you got several eras in hip hop, and there has to start being a certain level of respect on both sides to how we talk about 80s rappers, 90s rappers, and 2000s rappers. Whether you want to have a and I see where I kind of went wrong with my list, because every rapper on that list that I had, they were in their own lane and they brought something very unique to the to the musical genre, to that era. I could talk about Pete Rock all day. I could talk about Gang Starr all day. Jazz Mataz, Guru. We could sit here and talk about what the best Wu-Tang Clan album of all time. I could sit here and tell you that, or I could sit here and tell you that I don't really have a particular favorite, because I feel like they all bring something very unique. You know, in celebrating 50 years of hip hop and understanding why this musical genre is so important to people, there needs to be an understanding. And I think right now we have to get to that understanding that this is not about who ranks or who outranks anybody. It's really about reverence and respect. The same type of reverence and respect we have for R&B singers. You know, you wouldn't compare Patti LaBelle to Jill Scott. You know, you wouldn't compare, because they both had their own unique lane. Everybody has their own unique lane when they're creating their art. And I think we have to get back to appreciating the art form. And that's what's the problem with hip hop right now in its 50th year. We're not appreciating the art form for what it is. We're trying to make it out to be this rebuttal or this debate. And it doesn't need to be this way. It shouldn't have to be this way. So I would like to say, happy birthday to hip hop music, and music, a musical genre that came from the streets of the Bronx, the projects, to East River, to people like Kool Herc, Afrika Bambaataa, and Grandmaster Flash. I would like to say thank you for creating one of the most greatest musical genres of our time. Your contributions to this musical genre will not be forgotten and you will not be forsaken for the work that you put in to this musical genre. I think it's the most important thing. to understand and to appreciate and respect the founders of this musical genre. Because without it, I don't know where Black America would be. We've reached the pinnacle. Hip hop is all over the world now. It's in places like Brazil. It's in places like Tokyo, Berlin, Paris. It's in South Korea, South Africa, Mexico, Colombia. It's all over the world. And we wouldn't have what we have if it wasn't for the founders. It's just important. It doesn't need to be a debate about who is better than who. Understand that this is an art form. This is an art form that's been around for years and is going to continue to be around. Whatever it be redefined as, let's just hope that the next generation that carries the mantle doesn't destroy what's been given to them and then pass it on to another generation that might redefine it. That's what's the most important thing about understanding why this 50th anniversary is very important. But this is going to be a brief episode. This is Media Talks TV. I'm Tony J. And I thank you for tuning in and happy 50th birthday, hip hop music. And you don't stop. I'm out.